Nobody on set could have prepared for the energy Sierra brought that day. Sharp, focused, and carrying something she clearly wasn't afraid to use. The whispers started before she even walked into the lounge, with crewmate Embers saying she'd been keeping quiet all week, but making calls in the parking lot like she was building a case. By the time she stepped through the door, you could feel it, the shift. Eyes followed her, conversations stalled, and even Yandy put her phone down. Because everyone knew, whatever Sierra had been holding in, today was the day she was going, to let it out. But it wasn't just the fact she was ready to speak. It was who she was aiming at. Mendeecees, the man who had somehow kept his reputation intact despite the constant smoke around him, was suddenly in her crosshairs. And according to rumblings behind the scenes, she wasn't planning to drop hints. She was ready to unload. She deserves the truth, Sierra told a producer off camera, her voice low but deadly certain, and if I'm the one who has to give it to her, so be it. The cast had no idea how far she'd go, but they were about to find out. The room was already tense before Sierra even stepped in, but the second she walked through that doorway, the atmosphere shifted so sharply it was almost physical. Conversations trailed off mid-sentence, the usual. Laughter around the lounge table faded into a low hum, and every head seemed to tilt just slightly in her direction. She wasn't rushing, wasn't loud, but her energy came in first, measured, controlled, and loaded with intent. She slid her sunglasses off with one hand, tossed them into her bag, and set the bag down on a chair like she was planting a flag. Mendeecees was across the room, leaning back in his seat next to Yandy, one arm draped lazily over the back of her chair. He wore that small smirk he always puts on when the cameras are rolling, the one that says he's already decided how this is going to look on screen. Yandy was tapping on her phone, pretending not to notice Sierra's entrance, but the subtle straightening of her spine gave her away. Nobody said a word as Sierra walked over and took the seat directly across from them. She didn't speak right away. Instead, she reached into her bag again, pulled out her phone, and set it face down on the table in front of her. The move was small, but it was enough to make Bambi, who was sitting off to the side, raise her eyebrows and lean forward ever so slightly. Rashida shifted in her chair, crossing and uncrossing her legs, her eyes moving from Sierra to Mendeecees like she was reading the air before she decided whether to stay quiet or jump in. "You've been real. Comfortable," Sierra said finally, her voice low but crisp. "Too comfortable." Mendeecees tilted his head, smirk widening just a hair. "Comfortable about what exactly?" "About lying," Sierra shot back without hesitation. "About thinking nobody's gonna check you because you've got her sitting next to you." She nodded toward Yandy, who looked up from her phone at last, her face carefully blank. "This again?" Mendeecees sighed, glancing at Yandy as though they'd already had some version of this conversation in private. "No, not this again," Sierra said. "This is new, and you're gonna want to pay attention because I'm not talking about some old rumors. I'm talking about right now, 2 weeks ago. And before you even try to say it, yeah, I've got proof." That got everyone's attention. Spice stopped stirring her drink, her eyes locking on Sierra. Bambi put her phone down entirely, resting both elbows on the table. Kirk tried to cover his curiosity with a light laugh, but it fell flat in the silence. Yandy leaned forward just enough to close the distance between her and Sierra. "Proof of what?" she asked. "Proof," Sierra said, tapping her phone twice and unlocking the screen, "that the person he told you, and everybody else, he cut off, he's still talking to. Not just talking to, but asking to stay quiet. Telling her not to. Stir things up. Telling her to keep playing along." Mendeecees shifted in his chair, leaning forward now too. "You're spinning this," he said. "You don't know the full story." "I know exactly what I heard," Sierra said, her tone steady. "And so will she." She turned the phone toward Yandy. The camera crews angled slightly, trying to catch Yandy's reaction without breaking the scene. She stared at the screen, for a few seconds, her eyes scanning whatever was in front of her. Her jaw tightened. "What is this supposed to be?" she asked without looking up. "It's a voice note," Sierra explained. "From him, dated 2 weeks ago. And before you even ask, no, it's not edited, it's not clipped to sound worse. It's exactly how it was sent to me." Mendeecees shook his head, chuckling under his breath like he couldn't believe what was happening. "You really came in here with this? With something you don't even have context for?" You mean the context where you told her and the rest of us that you blocked this woman months ago? Sierra countered. Because if that's the context you're talking about, we've all got it. Yandy finally looked up from the phone, locking eyes with him. Did you tell her you blocked her? Yeah, he admitted. Because I did, back then. I'm not talking to her like that anymore. You just told her to stay quiet, Sierra cut in. How is that not talking to her? The silence that followed was sharp. Rashida exhaled through her nose, crossing her arms. Spice sat back, in her seat but kept her eyes locked on Mendeecees. Yandy didn't move. Is she lying? She asked him again, more firmly this time. It's not like that, he repeated, glancing toward the cameras before looking back at her. You're letting her stir this up for TV. This has nothing to do with TV, Sierra said, shaking her head. This has to do with you running your mouth about me in interviews, calling me messy, while you're out here moving worse than anybody. Bambi let out a short laugh at that, covering her mouth. She's not wrong, she muttered, earning a quick side-eye from Spice. Mendeecees looked between the two of them, clearly irritated now. You love this, don't you? You love when it's somebody else's business you can jump into. No, Sierra said simply. I love the truth, and I don't care who it's about. If you're lying, you're lying. Yandy was still watching him, her face unreadable, but her hand was clenched in her lap. So you've been in contact with her? She said slowly. And you didn't tell me? I didn't think it mattered, he said. It mattered enough. For you to hide it? Sierra snapped. He opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, rubbing a hand over his jaw. The cameras caught every second of his hesitation. You're acting like this is something it's not, he finally said. And she's acting like she's doing you a favor, when really she's just making things worse. Worse for who? Sierra asked. Because if it's worse for you, that's not my problem. Bambi shifted in her seat, glancing at Spice like she could feel the room heating up. Rashida glanced toward Kirk, who gave her a small shrug. Nobody seemed eager to be the first to break the standoff between the three in the center. Yandy leaned, back in her chair, her eyes still locked on Mendeecees. If you think this doesn't change things, you're wrong, she said. Mendeecees exhaled slowly, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. Then maybe you need to hear the rest before you decide what changes. Oh, there's more, Sierra said, her tone sharp with implication. But we can get to that when you're ready to stop acting like you're the victim here. For why? A moment. No one said anything. The weight of whatever was left unsaid hung in the air like a storm cloud, and everyone in the room knew it was only a matter of time before it broke open. Mendeecees' knee bounced as he sat forward, elbows on his thighs like he was trying to hold himself together without letting it show. The cameras were locked in on his face, catching the way his jaw flexed and his eyes kept darting to Sierra's phone. She was calm, too calm, like someone who had already decided there was no turning back from what she was about to do. Yandy hadn't moved much since looking at the screen, but there was something different in her breathing now. Slower. Heavier. She wasn't shocked anymore. She was processing. You're doing all this in front of everybody, Mendeecees said, finally breaking the silence. Like you really care about her, but all you care about is making me look bad. If you look bad, that's because of you, Sierra replied without blinking. I didn't send those voice notes. I didn't have those conversations. You did. Bambi leaned over to Spice and whispered something, but her eyes stayed glued to the center of the table. Spice didn't respond. She was too busy watching Yandy trying to read her next move. Yandy finally looked up at Sierra, her voice softer than before but steadier. How long have you had this? Long enough to see how far you'd go to protect him, Sierra answered. And long enough to realize you were protecting someone who wasn't protecting you. Mendeecees shook his head slowly. You've been sitting on this for weeks? I gave you the chance to do right without it getting to this, Sierra said. But you didn't take it. He let out a low laugh, like he couldn't believe. The audacity. You think you're the judge of what's right? You don't know what's been going on between us. Maybe I don't, she said, but I know lying when I hear it. And I know that whatever you've been telling her doesn't match what you've been telling other people. Yandy's gaze slid back to Mendeecees. Who else have you been talking to? He hesitated. Nobody that matters. The phrase hit like a slap. Sierra raised her brows, leaning back. Nobody that matters? You told that woman enough to have her sending me receipts? She mattered enough for you to ask her to stay quiet. Rashida sat forward, voice low. This is messy. It's been messy, Sierra said. Only difference is now it's not just whispers. Mendeecees looked toward the door like he was debating whether to just walk out, but instead he sat back and crossed his arms, the smirk gone completely. So, what's your endgame here? You want her to leave me? You want to blow up my life for good? My endgame, Sierra said slowly, is for her to know exactly who she's dealing with. What she does after that is her choice. Yandy's eyes stayed locked on Mendeecees. So you admit you've still been in contact. He shifted in his seat again, letting out a short breath. I admit I had a conversation, but it wasn't what she's making it sound like. Then play it, Sierra said. Let her hear the whole thing from your phone, right now. Mendeecees froze. The request hung in the air, and the fact that he didn't move said more than words could. Spice leaned back, muttering under her breath. If it was innocent, he'd have played it by now. Bambi gave a small nod, eyes narrowing on him. Yandy's voice dropped. Why won't you play it? Because it's not worth it, he said quickly. It's just gonna make things worse. Worse for who? Sierra asked again. He didn't answer. The tension was a living thing now, creeping into every corner of the room. A producer shifted near the doorway but didn't step in. Everyone knew cutting the cameras now would be impossible to explain later. Sierra took her phone and placed it back into her bag. I'm not here to argue with you. I'm here to make sure she's not the last one in the room to know what's really going on. And you think you're some kind of hero for that? Mendeecees said, his tone sharper now. No, she replied, but I'm not the coward in this story either. Yandy leaned back, folding her arms over her chest, staring at him like she was trying to memorize every micro-expression. You've had chances, she said quietly. So many chances. And I've told you the truth, he insisted. You've told me your version of it, she corrected. Not the same thing. There was another pause. Longer this time, like everyone was waiting to see if he'd try again to explain himself. But he didn't. Bambi broke the silence, speaking almost to herself. She's right. The version and the truth aren't always the same. Mendeecees shot her a look. Stay out of it. Too late for that, Bambi replied, leaning back in her chair. The air in the room felt thick. Nobody was moving too fast. Nobody was raising their voice, but it was all teetering, on the edge of something bigger. Spice's eyes flicked toward the cameras, then back to Yandy. So what now? Spice asked. Yandy didn't answer immediately. She glanced at Sierra, then at Mendeecees. Now, I think I need to decide if I've been loving the man I thought you were or the man you've actually been. The weight of that landed hard. Mendeecees looked like he wanted to respond, but didn't know where to start. Sierra stood up, slow and deliberate, her gaze sweeping the table before she turned toward the door. When you're ready for the rest, let me know, she said over her shoulder. Because there's more, and this time, I'm not sitting on it. The room stayed silent as she walked out, the echo of her heels carrying the tension right along with her. Yandy didn't look away from Mendeecees. Is she lying? He didn't answer. His silence was the loudest thing in the room. The door closed behind Sierra with a soft click, but it might as well have been a gunshot for how sharply it cut through the air. Nobody spoke. Nobody even shifted. It was as if the room had gone into a strange kind of standoff, every person waiting for someone else to make the first move. Mendeecees sat frozen, his hands clasped together like he was holding them still by force. Yandy hadn't moved either, but the weight of her stare was obvious, her eyes locked on him, cold and unblinking. The crew barely breathed, knowing they were catching something raw enough to make the edit without a single extra push. Finally, Mendeecees exhaled, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. You really gonna sit here and let her dump a bunch of half-truths like that? Yandy's voice was quiet but firm. I'm not letting anybody do anything. I'm listening. I'm watching. and I'm deciding what's real. He shook his head with a low chuckle, but there was no humor in it. She's got you twisted. She's been waiting to hit me with something since last season. Now she found her opening. Why'd she find an opening at all? Bambi asked from across the table, her tone sharp. Mendeecees' eyes flicked to her. You're enjoying this a little too much. I'm enjoying watching you squirm, Bambi replied. There's a difference. Spice leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand. You know what I think? If you had nothing to hide, you would have played whatever's on that phone from your own. You'd have shut her down in 2 minutes flat. It's not about hiding, he shot back. It's about not giving in to her little setup. Rashida raised a brow. Setup or not, you lied about cutting that woman off. And that's not something you can blame on editing. Yandy's gaze didn't waver. How many conversations have you had with her since you told me it was done? Mendeecees hesitated, his tongue pressing against his cheek. Just a couple. And none of them were what she's making it seem like. Then what were they? She pressed. Logistics, he said quickly. Stuff I didn't think was worth bringing up. Bambi let out a short laugh. Stuff you didn't think was worth bringing up. Oh, this is rich. Mendeecees' jaw clenched. You stay out of this. Too late, Bambi replied without missing a beat. Spice glanced toward Yandy. You know she said there's more, right? If she's got something else, it's gonna hit harder than this. Yandy didn't look away from him. So is there more? He leaned back in his chair, running a hand over his beard. Not that matters. Stop saying that, she snapped suddenly, her voice rising for the first time. You don't get to decide what matters to me. The room went still, again. Even Kirk, who'd been quietly sipping his drink, froze mid-motion. Mendeecees opened his mouth, but the sound that came out was more of a sigh than a word. You're acting like this is the worst thing I've ever done. I'm not here to play detective, she said, her tone steady but cold. But I'm not going to let you keep making decisions for me about what I need to know. That ends today. Mendeecees leaned forward, his hands clasped. And if I tell you everything, then what? Then I decide if I can live with it, she said. But if you hold back again, even once, you won't have to wonder where we stand. You'll know. The cameras caught the way he swallowed hard before nodding, slowly. All right, he said quietly. All right. But nobody in the room believed the conversation was over. Not even him. मेंडीचीज की आंखों में वो चेहरा था जो आदमी तब बनाता है जब उसके पास शब्द कम पड़ जाते हैं और कमरा भरी भरी लगता है। उसने धीरे से टेबल की तरफ देखा, उंगलियों के बीच एक छोटा सा गप बनाया जैसे कुछ गिन रहा हो। फिर उसने अपनी नजर यंदी पर टिकाई। आवाज हल्की थी, लेकिन वजन ऐसा जैसे हर लफ्ज को खींच कर निकालना पड़ रहा हो। मैंने उससे बात की, उसने कहा। वैसे नहीं जैसे तुम सोच रही हो, लेकिन हाँ बात हुई। मुझे लगा था मैं इससे चुपचाप खत्म कर दूंगा। मैं नहीं चाहता था ये सब सर्कस बन जाए। यंदी ने सिर्फ देखा। तुमने मुझे साइड पे कर दिया, उसने जवाब दिया। ये तुमने किया। मेंडीचीज ने एक लम्हा चुप रहकर कहा, मैं बचाने की कोशिश कर रहा था, बड़ा मेस होने से रोक रहा था। स्पाइस ने अपनी कुर्सी से थोड़ा आगे झुककर कहा, मेस तो अब है, तो अब बोलो। मेंडीचीज ने अपने हाथ जोड़ लिए, आंखें दरवाजे की तरफ गई जैसे सियरा कभी भी वापस आ सकती हो। वो रियूनियन के बाद रीच आउट हुई, कह रही थी। लोग उसके पास आके सवाल पूछ रहे हैं। मैंने कहा चुप रहे, इंटरनेट पे कुछ मत डालना। एक बार वहां गया तो वापस नहीं आएगा। बम्बी ने सिर थोड़ा साइड किया। तो तुम एडमिट कर रहे हो कनेक्शन बना रखा था। मेंडीचीज ने गहरी सांस ली। मुझे नहीं करना चाहिए था और तुम्हें नहीं बताया क्योंकि मुझे पता था कैसे लगेगा। यंदी ने उसकी आंखों में देखा। वैसे ही लगता जैसे लग रहा है। तुमने अपने आराम के लिए मुझे अंधेरे में रखा। किर्क ने रशीदा की तरफ देखा जैसे पूछ रहा हो कि हम निकाल जाएं क्या, लेकिन रशीदा ने बस छोटा सा सिर हिला दिया। वो यहीं थी पूरा सुनने के लिए। मेंडीचीज ने अपने हाथ घासते हुए बोला, एक और बात है, वो लड़की कह रही थी लोग उससे पैसे ऑफर कर रहे हैं, ब्लॉग्स, पॉडकास्ट्स। किसी ने उससे कहा अगर रॉ फाइल्स नहीं देगी तो उसके वर्ड्स ट्विस्ट करेंगे। मैंने कहा कुछ मत भेजना, न टेक्स्ट न क्लिप। बम्बी की भावों में शाके आ गया। रॉ फाइल्स कौन सी? उसने आंख झपका कर कहा, वॉइस मेल्स, मैसेजेस, कुछ वीडियोस जो मुझे बनानी नहीं चाहिए थी। वो ऐसे नहीं थे, मैंने आर्ग्यूमेंट्स रिकॉर्ड किए थे। लगा था मैं अपना प्रूफ रख रहा हूँ, गलत था। यंदी का चेहरा बस थोड़ा सा बदला, लेकिन उसकी उंगलियों का ग्रिप कुर्सी पर टाइट हो गया। तुमने मेरे सबसे बुरे मोमेंट्स रिकॉर्ड किए मुझे प्रोटेक्ट करने के नाम पर? हम दोनों के? उसने तुरंत कहा। मैं डरा हुआ था। स्पाइस ने सर हिला दिया। सब डरते हैं, लेकिन सब रिकॉर्ड नहीं करते। रशीदा ने पूछा, वो कह रही थी और आएगा क्या? मेंडीचीज की आवाज धीमी हो गई। एक क्लिप है, हम बाउंड्री पर बात कर रहे थे। मैंने कुछ ऐसा कह दिया जो गलत सुनाई देता है। अगर वो बाहर गए तो? यंदी ने काट दिया। मेरे लिए वैसे ही था जैसे सुनाई देता था, क्योंकि मैं वहां थी। उस वक्त एक असिस्टेंट अंदर आई, फोन छुपाकर प्रोड्यूसर को दिया। प्रोड्यूसर ने देखा, रंग उड़ गया। फैन पेजेस ने नई रिकॉर्डिंग डाली है, हॉलवे कॉल कह रहे हैं। बम्बी ने तुरंत कहा, प्ले करो। फोन पर क्लिप चली, मेंडीचीज का वॉइस ट्रैफिक के शोर के बीच। अगर ये बाहर गया, मैं खत्म हो जाऊंगा। यंदी ने फोन वापस कर दिया। तुम तब भी सिर्फ अपने खत्म होने का सोच रहे थे। मेरा क्या? वो कुछ बोलना चाहता था, पर शब्द नहीं आए। बम्बी ने कहा, पानी तुम्हारे सीने तक आ गया था, तुमने उससे बताया भी नहीं। फिर सियरा वापस आई, शंट, लेकिन ऐसी नजर के जैसे उसने डिसाइड कर लिया हो। मैं नहीं चाहती यह उसके लिए और बुरा हो, उसने यंदी को कहा। लेकिन मैं चुप नहीं रहूंगी। यंदी ने सिर हिला दिया। मुझसे फ्रेजाइल की तरह मत बात करो, सीधा बोलो। सियरा ने कहा, यह बेबी रूमर नहीं है, ये पैटर्न है। लेट नाइट कॉल्स, फेवर्स, लोगों ने देखा, मुझे बताया, क्योंकि उन्हें पता था मैं नहीं छोड़ूंगी। मेंडीचीज ने हंसने की कोशिश की। क्लाउड चेसर्स कहेंगे कुछ भी, और जो पीस चाहते हैं वो कुछ नहीं कहते, सियरा ने जवाब दिया। यंदी ने गहरी सांस ली। मैं सच चाहती हूँ, बिना स्पिन। मैं नहीं चाहूंगी कि मैं किसी हाफ ट्रूथ का हिस्सा रहूं, और मैं नहीं चाहूंगी तुम मेरे लिए डिसाइड करो कि मुझे क्या पता चलना चाहिए। मेंडीचीज ने सिर झुका दिया। मैं गलत था। मैंने दरवाजा खुला रखा क्योंकि मुझे विलन नहीं बनना था। मुझे लगा मैं फॉल आउट कंट्रोल कर रहा हूँ। मैं छुप गया। बम्बी ने कहा, तुमने उसके लिए नहीं, अपने लिए किया। रशीदा ने धीरे से पूछा, अब क्या? यंदी ने उसकी तरफ देखा। मैं टाइम लूंगी, अपने लोगों से ऑफ कैमरा बात करूंगी, और अगर कोई फाइल है आज डिलीट होगी। तुम नहीं करोगे, कोई ऐसा करेगा जिस पे मैं ट्रस्ट करती हूँ। मेंडीचीज ने हाँ में सर हिला दिया, चुपचाप फोन टेबल पर रखा। प्रोड्यूसर ने टेक को बुलाया, फाइल्स वाइप करवाई। एक फोल्डर डिलीट हुआ, क्लाउड सिंक बैंड हुआ, बैकअप्स डिसेबल हुए। यंदी ने पूरा देखा, कुछ नहीं बोला। काम खत्म होते ही उसने सियरा की तरफ देखा। शुक्रिया ये मुझसे कहने के लिए। सियरा ने बस सर हिला दिया। मुझे अफसोस है कि मैं हूँ जो कह रही हूँ। यंदी ने कहा, मुझे नहीं, मैं इंटरनेट से सीख कर थक गई हूँ। बम्बी ने सीधा पूछा, तो अब खत्म? आज के लिए? यंदी ने कहा, हमेशा के लिए नहीं। मेंडीचीज खड़ा हुआ, जैकेट उठाया, दरवाजे पर रुककर एक पल उस तरफ देखा और बिना कुछ कहे चला गया। कमरा अब चुप था, लेकिन वो चुप जो बाद में भी रहती है। स्पाइस ने यंदी का शोल्डर रुब किया। बम्बी ने दरवाजा चेक किया। सियरा ने कुर्सी नहीं छोड़ी। दूर के बाहर शाम हो चुकी थी। यंदी ने हुडी पहनी, सीधा चली गई, बिना स्पीचेस, बिना प्रॉमिसेस, बस अपनी चल में। कैमरास बैंड हुए, लेकिन कहानी बैंड नहीं होती। वो सिर्फ अपनी जगह बदल लेती है। The tension you just saw unfold is far from over. If you think this was the peak, you might be in for a shock, because the next episode could take everything we've heard tonight and flip it on its head. The way Sierra stood her ground, the way Yandy demanded every truth without a single crack in her voice, and the way Mendeecees walked out without saying a word. These aren't moments you can just brush aside. They stick with you. They leave. Questions that eat at the back of your mind. Was this really the whole story? Or is there still more sitting in someone's phone waiting to drop when the cameras are rolling again? Could Yandy ever truly trust Mendeecees after this? Or is she already preparing herself for a different ending? And what about Sierra? Will she hold back now that she's started? Or is she ready to burn every bridge to get her truth out? This is the kind of drama that keeps fans talking all night long, and I want to hear what you think. Do you believe Mendeecees was just trying to control the fallout, or do you think he was hiding something bigger? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because I read them all and you might see your theory in our next video. If you want to be the first to know when the next twist hits, make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and like this video so we know you're locked in for the ride. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next.